In this tutorial, we're going to look at polygons and how we can edit them. In the previous one, we introduced the cube, and I'm starting with that polygon cube. If we're starting fresh, we could go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and click on Cube, and then I'm going to click in my interface. Now, W on the keyboard would allow me to move the entire piece of geometry around. E would allow me to rotate it. And R would allow me to scale it. My is set for a number of undos, so I'm going to hit Command Z on the keyboard to return to where I was when I first started with my cube. I'm going to make sure my cube is selected, and I know the cube is selected when it is bound by these green lines and the channel box is active, showing me my translation functions. If I were to right click on that cube, up at the top there are a series of editing points we can address. I'm going to click on Vertex, and when I do so, my cube is now bound by blue lines, and at their intersections are little red vertices. I'm going to click on a vertex, and I'm going to hit W. And when I do, I have the opportunity now to edit that point. You'll see that polygons edit in very hard edges. I could shift select two at a time, and I could edit both of those at a time, and so on. Now, I've moved my geometry incrementally with these sub-edits. Now I want to move the whole piece of geometry again. I'm going to right click on the geometry again, and up at about 2 o'clock you'll see the word Object Mode. I'm going to click on it, and you'll see we've returned to the green bounding box that we had originally. That allows me to transform my geometry now in that new edited state. With polygons, if I was to right click again, I can choose Edge at 12 o'clock, and that allows me to edit my shapes on selected edges. And when you click on a selected edge, you'll notice that it turns brown. So in this case, I could move it using W. I could hit E on the keyboard, and I could rotate it. I could hit R on this keyboard, and I could scale it as well. And then if I wanted to return to the object mode, I would right click and choose Object, and the green bounding box reappears. Polygons allow us the opportunity to delete faces as well. So once again, I'll right click on my geometry, I'll choose face, and I'll put my cursor over a face. You'll notice that when you put it over the face, it turns red. If you select it, it turns green. And then if you roll off of it, it turns brown. Now I've selected it, and once again I can move my geometry from there. I can hit E and rotate it. I can hit R to scale it. Or I can hit my delete key and open it up. I'm going to right click and go back to object mode. I'm going to hit W, and I'm going to drag this on either my Z or X axis so it's at the side of the center of my viewport. You'll see these pronounced black lines that define the middle of the viewport. One other thing to point out here is that you'll notice that the axis configuration, the red, the green, and the blue arrows, are reflected in the lower left-hand corner of each viewport as well. So if that green arrow on your geometry is pointing down, that means you've accidentally rotated your model upside down, and you'll want the arrow to point up again. Now that we've edited this cube, let's hold down our space bar. Let's go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we'll get a sphere, and I'll click and introduce the sphere. Now, just like the cube, the channel window reflects where it is, the size, and the rotation. And once again, if I would use W on the keyboard, I can move that about. It's reflected in the channel window. E would allow me to rotate it. If I put my cursor in the middle of all the circular axes or vertices, I can now rotate the cube free inside of the perspective view. And I can also hit R and scale it. If I wanted to edit the shape, I could right click, choose vertex, and I could choose one or more. In this case, I'm going to marquee select a few at the top, and I'll hit W and I'll move it up just randomly. If I wanted to, I could scale them, so I'll scale, hitting R. And if I wanted to, I could hit E and I could rotate that series. The one thing you'll probably figure out pretty quickly is that if you select one vertex, you're really not having any kind of an effect on that geometry. So that's the only tool with the sub-edit that you need more than one vertex selected to have a change take place.